Look closely at a live global flight map. You will see millions of people moving across oceans every single day. Even the North Pole is crowded. Flights from New York to Hong Kong cross the Arctic Circle routinely to save time. Basic geometry promises that a straight line is always the fastest path. So, connecting the southern hemispheres should be simple. But if you look down at the bottom of the world, there is nothing. Just a massive, terrifying void. Airlines actively avoid this route. When flying from Santiago to Sydney, passenger jets take a massive, expensive detour instead. The obvious answer seems to be the extreme weather. Antarctica is the coldest and windiest continent on Earth. But that is not the real reason. Modern jetliners are built to handle freezing temperatures and brutal turbulence easily. The true trap is invisible. It is a deadly combination of brutal physics and a terrifying international aviation law. This law dictates exactly how far a twin-engine plane can fly from the nearest emergency runway before it becomes illegal. In the middle of Antarctica, there is no safety net. If an engine fails, you cannot simply make an emergency landing on soft snow. So, what exactly is this law that completely paralyzes global aviation over the southern edge of our planet? To understand the bottleneck, we have to look back at the early days of aviation. Early pilots trying to cross the polar regions faced a wall of pure physics. Earth's magnetic field lines point straight down at the poles. This completely blinded their mechanical compasses, leaving them flying into the white void without direction. Then came the radio blackouts, as solar particles trapped at the poles swallowed communication signals whole. But as technology evolved, a massive geographic contrast became clear between the two ends of the world. The North Pole is just a frozen ocean, surrounded by major land masses like Canada, Russia, and Europe. If something goes wrong up north, a diversion airport is usually within reach. Antarctica is the exact opposite. It is a massive, isolated continent surrounded by the Southern Ocean, one of the most violent seas on Earth. If an airline solves the navigation issue, they hit a deadlier question. Where do you land when everything goes wrong? So what exactly changed in how global aviation actually works? It all comes down to a strict four-letter regulatory acronym, ETOPS. This stands for Extended Range Twin Engine Operational Performance Standards. It dictates exactly how far a twin-engine jet can fly away from an emergency airport. Over decades, modern engineering pushed this safety window from 60 minutes to over 5 hours. But even with a 5-hour safety margin, the center of Antarctica remains a complete dead zone. Look at the map. There are simply no diversion airports down there to save you. Now you might think, why not just use massive four-engine planes like the Boeing 747? Those giants are not restricted by ETOPS rules at all. But the apparent solution creates an entirely new problem: capitalist economics. Four engines consume way too much fuel, making these routes financial suicide for airlines. There are simply not enough passengers wanting to fly directly across the bottom of the world. But wait. What about the Amundsen Scott Station right at the South Pole? It has a runway. But here is the catch. That runway is made entirely of heavily compacted ice and snow. Commercial plane tires landing here would shred or slide completely out of control. There are no massive fuel reserves or mechanics here to service a large passenger jet. Capitalist math and cold hard physics have effectively locked this gate shut. But what happens when things go completely wrong? Let's look at a critical emergency: a sudden loss of cabin pressure. Standard aviation law dictates a clear, non-negotiable fix. You must immediately drop altitude to 10,000 feet. At 10,000 feet, the air is dense enough to breathe normally. But over the dead center of Antarctica, this routine creates a terrifying paradox. Because here, 10,000 feet is not open air. 10,000 feet is the ground. The Antarctic ice sheet is actually a colossal, elevated plateau. If you descend to escape oxygen starvation, you fly directly into a mountain of solid ice, and air pressure is only your first nightmare. Standard jet fuel freezes at -47 degrees Celsius. But in the polar stratosphere during winter, temperatures plummet to -80. If the fuel freezes, the engines die, leaving you gliding in absolute silence. Even if the pilots miraculously land the plane on the rugged snow, the cabin becomes a deep freezer within a single hour. And during the polar winter, no rescue team on Earth can reach you. So, does this mean nobody ever sees Antarctica from a commercial flight window? Not exactly. If you book a flight from Santiago to Sydney, you might just catch a glimpse of the icy white continent. But look closely at the flight path. The aircraft is not flying across the South Pole. Instead, it hugs the absolute edge of the frozen coast, keeping a safe distance from the dangerous dead zone. Even along these outer edges, commercial pilots must battle a silent, invisible enemy: solar storms. Near the magnetic poles, intense space radiation can completely black out satellite communications. To legally operate here, airlines must carry specialized polar survival suits for every single person on board. Airline dispatchers must also monitor the fuel tank temperatures live every single minute of the flight. If the fuel temperature drops near -40 degrees, the pilot is forced to dive into warmer, lower air. But burning fuel at lower altitudes is incredibly inefficient, costing airlines massive amounts of money. Which raises the ultimate question: if the present technology makes it this hard, what will it take to finally conquer the southern sky? But human engineering never stands still. So, what changes and what comes next? New fuel additives are being tested to push the freezing point far below -47 degrees. Mega constellations of low Earth orbit satellites are finally bringing continuous internet coverage to the dead zones of the Deep South. It seems like every technical barrier is about to fall. Commercial routes directly across Antarctica should be next. But fixing the tech actually creates an entirely new problem: economics. Developing these specialized systems costs billions. Yet, the actual number of passengers wanting to fly between the southern continents remains tiny. Airlines cannot justify spending immense capital just to save 20 minutes on a flight that only runs twice a week. So, here is the clear insight. The true barrier keeping planes away from the South Pole is no longer just the brutal cold. It is the cold, hard math of human capitalism. The ultimate limit is profit, not physics. Antarctica remains an untouched white desert, a proud reminder that some lines on Earth are still not worth crossing for $1. But as global trade shifts south, how long will this icy isolation last? Tell us what you think below, and we will see you in the next sky. But as global trade shifts south, how long will this icy isolation last? Tell us what you think below, and we will see you in the next sky. But as global trade shifts south, how long will this icy isolation last? Tell us what you think below, and we will see you in the next sky.